Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. You know, I love talking to authors because they have the courage to take their thoughts, their stories, their lessons, put it down in a book and share it with the many, ultimately changing their legacy and their destiny in the process. And if you're looking to write a book out there, I highly recommend you check out dreamstarterspublishing.com. We can help you out with wherever you're at in the process. And if you have a book that's already done, you want to generate leads with it for your business, check out bookmarketingcrm.com. Now, if you're an entrepreneur out there, most people who do listen to this podcast, I would say, is an entrepreneur. Um, if you're looking to gain that competitive advantage, maybe this is going to be the episode for you. There's an individual that we're going to interview here that wrote a book called Shared Services, Adding Value to the Business Units. And it really is all about, differentiating yourself, but also increasing that competitive advantage. If you could do that in the right fashion, you can win at any level. So it is an honor to have Don Schulman with us. Thanks so much for being here, sir.
A pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, let's start off the genesis of this book. Shared Services, super clean title, super clean cover. What made you want to sit down and write this? I believe this rendition, I think, is about 20 years old. Is that right?
That's correct. And it was in the early stages of a huge business boom. And I was an entrepreneur, and I had just come into one of the accounting firms to help them build their consulting business. And we knew that shared services was going to be hot, or at least we were betting that shared services was going to be a hot space in the marketplace. We had some very clear points of view about how to go about it, and we put it down in writing. And, we didn't just explain what it was or why you needed to do it, but the book is a how-to book as well. And a lot of the book's success was based on that back end, not just the what and why, but how you do it. And people would buy these books up. Project teams were putting this stuff into businesses, would buy these books up and give us a call. It was terrific.
Well, I guess let's start off with the simple question of shared services. What is the definition of that? I'm assuming many people might have come across it. Maybe they don't know the clear definition. So what is it?
So shared services is a really simple concept. For large corporations, you usually have multiple divisions that do different things, make different things, or sell to different markets. But the back office of those businesses are always doing the same activity. They have to close the books, they have to pay the bills, they have to buy things. And what you want to do is you don't want to have that proliferate across multiple businesses as you grow, because it gets expensive to have that kind of infrastructure. So what you do is you centralize the infrastructure, but leave the businesses in a relationship model to what you've done. And it could be for IT, finance, sourcing, procurement, your supply chain, distribution, all that kind of stuff. And you keep that centralized and let the businesses do what they're supposed to do, focus on their customers.
Nice. And I'm looking at your bio here. I just want to give the listeners sort of a rundown on where you come from and how you got here. I'm looking at the bio, but it might be out of date. So you probably have accomplished a lot since this bio that I'm reading was published. So can you give people a quick little summary of where you come from and what you're able to accomplish?
Yeah, so let me lean into this a little bit. I started out as a consultant in my own business, starting out driving as an entrepreneur, driving consulting advisory to large companies. And eventually, because of the work I was doing specifically in shared services and similar kinds of things, I moved over to the big accounting firms, and which is when I wrote this book at that time. But we were a small little company figuring out what was our message, how we were going to go to the marketplace, and what did we want to do. And basically, we took that concept, brought it over to Coopers and Lybrand, which became PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the big four accounting firms. And from there, my career just launched itself. I've worked for a bunch of the major firms in the industry, IBM, Accenture, et cetera. And I'm now semi-retired. I advise CEOs, and I sit on boards and give on boards of directors of smaller companies to give them advice. Do a lot of work in the startup space, helping companies figure out how to launch and what they need to get done in order to make the market work.
Yeah, I'm assuming everybody has heard of PricewaterhouseCoopers. So, yeah, very big name. And you're saying it turned into that, right? That's one of the big four. I was a finance major at Duquesne University. It seemed like I graduated 2007. That was a phrase that was tossed around quite a bit throughout my college career. So, you were there in the beginning, I guess, huh?
I was there in the beginning. It was great to be able to be there on the ground floor as we started creating these models for shared services for our clients. and to start that business, you know, it was a small business when we started. You know, even the book even talks about the fact that when we started the practice, it was, you know, it was nascent. Nobody knew it was going to work. And now the shared services out BPO business is, you know, a $200 billion industry. So,
So it was a relatively new way of looking at business in late 90s. Is that right?
completely new, not never done before. You know, the big conglomerates had independent businesses, and everybody did their own thing. And even smaller companies, you know, I mean, relatively billion-dollar companies, every business was doing its own thing. Every business had its own, paid its own bills, closed its own books, did all its own procurement, did all its own supply chain. Nobody connected those dots and realized the efficiency gains that could be done. And they weren't just efficiency, they were really effectiveness as well. It was both, right? It was money saving as well as being better at it when they did it.
Well,
So,
the word that really stood out to me whenever I was reading through the outline was decentralization. Shared services goes hand in hand with decentralization. Now, within the $1 million circle, my groups, we love that word, decentralization. So, what do you mean by that?
so most companies, what they want to do is they want to let the businesses run, right? You want people to deal with their customers, deal with their products, and run as fast as they can. And if you have a big corporate center that's trying to drive and make decisions on that stuff, it only slows things down. It creates bureaucracy and inefficiency. So decentralization allows businesses to go run as fast as they can, be really flexible, really entrepreneurial on what they need to get done and how they need to do it. And every company does it. Even the largest companies in the world start with these, what they call garage houses, businesses, tiny little ideas that emerge into big spaces. In fact, our shared services business was an example of that, right? Big company, but we had a small little business that grew really quick. So that's the idea of decentralized. Let everybody go free. The thing is that there's a lot of stuff that you have to do in the back and middle office of your company. That's, you know, you got to buy pencils. Everybody's got to have pens. Everybody's got to pay their bills, right? You know, doesn't really matter who you are. Boy, if we can take that off your desk and have you focus on the market, that's the concept.
Got it. So it's very much a who, not how approach, right? Have you ever read that
Absolutely.
book?
Yes,
And what you're saying within shared services, you focus on what you're good at and only what you're good at, and you basically partner up. I think you have a phrase in here: partners, not customers. That's
that's
important.
right.
So you partner up, and therefore, whoever has a strength in an area, they deal with that issue and that issue alone. Is that right?
Yes, and there's two sides to that partnering. The first side is within the shared services, within the organization we're creating, you know, somebody in one organization, one part of the company may have a really good idea and applies to three other parts of the company. So we partner within amongst ourselves to get those best ideas and make sure they come across all of the parts, fancy word, the value chain, all the functions of the company. Finance says something to supply chain says something to HR, and we're all sharing. The other part of partnering is those business units that are out there trying to make money, they have unique needs. And we need to understand those needs and serve them, right? They're our partners. You know, I have a unique product or I need to buy a widget and I want it to be very specific. Well, if I'm doing procurement centrally, I better have a deep understanding of what that widget is and what it's going to do in order to get you the right one.
Hmm. And so this is great, obviously, for big companies, right? It seems like you could stay pretty nimble, even if you're a monster company, but great for smaller businesses because they don't have to have all the answers. They just have to know the people that have all the answers and the processes in place. So somebody out there listening probably has a startup business, maybe doing six figures. I guess the question in chapter 3 is shared services right for you? In my opinion, I mean, I think we're doing this at some degree where there are certain aspects of our company that we outsource to. We used to outsource for fulfillment, but then we brought it in house because the partner dropped the ball a few times. But it did give us the ability to grow pretty fast and get our footing within the industry. So anybody can do this, right? So is shared services right for you? What's this chapter about?
So the best part of this is, and actually contributed to the growth of our business, was technology companies in the early 2000s were growing like leaps and bounds. All these startups, and everyone, none of them had, you know, accounting systems. None of them had fulfillment systems or people that could do all that. So these were tiny little startups, and they would come to shared service or BPO organizations business process outsourcing organizations. You alluded to it. And they would come to us and say, help us get started. We don't want to deal with this. This is stuff that we're not about. Help us get going. And it's by taking that stuff off your plate so you can focus on your business is all about. Close your books, pay your bills, take care of your accounting. The fact is, I suspect your accounting is done by an accounting firm, right? Maybe a small accounting firm. Yep. Everybody does that. It's just an extension of that thought. We all have accountants. I mean, as an advisor and CEO advisor, I'm semi-retired. I have my own business. I have an accountant, right? I'm already outsourcing and giving him work to do. It's exactly that process.
Yeah, and I guess with technology, this is becoming way more common, right? You have maybe different people that you work with. There are other entrepreneurs, like you said, an accountant, whether it's an insurance person, whether it's legal. They have their own businesses, and all you're doing is basically handing it off to them for them to do it. And they think like an entrepreneur. This is another benefit. There's a lot of ownership tied to that. It's not an employee, it's a partner. I like how you say that.
Yeah, actually, it comes back to your fulfillment story that you had it. The guy dropped the ball. An accountant, a small accounting firm, right? They don't want to drop the ball, right? A small law firm or insurance broker, they don't want to drop the ball. They need your business. Yeah. So it's really important to them. And I can't understate the importance of technology in all of this. 25 years ago, the technology boom was just beginning. And the systems and the technology that made this all work, they made it really easy for me to send a file to somebody else. I mean, my accountant sends me a file. I just upload my stuff that I need for taxes, and he just takes care of it. My insurance broker, it's a portal, right? I just log in and it's all done. That didn't exist 25 years ago, right?
What a world's difference, I'm telling you.
What a world of difference. And it makes the connectivity to these activity, to these functions, to these back office functions that we do in shared services and outsourcing. It makes it so easy to do because all I have to do is upload the data, maybe in their format. Maybe they say, hey, it's got to look like this. That's fine. We'll send it to you the way you want, as long as I don't have to do it, right? We used to say, we'll take the information, we'll swizzle it, and we'll give it back to you better than you gave it to us.
Awesome. So in the subtitle, you have the phrase adding value. And I think that, with everything that's happening in the world, technology, it's becoming easier and easier to do certain things. Now, I believe people are becoming complacent, becoming lazy. It gives individuals who never stop growing, never stop adding value, an ultimate advantage in the marketplace. And so adding value, right? This is what you're doing with shared services, is that you can really build that relationship. You can really strengthen that strength, I guess is probably the best phrase to use. And you could constantly serve, right? Service to the many, for service to the many leads to greatness. That's a Jim Rohn quote. So adding value, that's the name of the game. And with all the technology changes, people are going to lose a lot of market share. But if you add value and you always have your heart in that place, you're going to win. So whether it's partnering up or just figuring out a way to serve using the technology, that is the key. Am I right? And is there anything you could share with our audience and how important that is?
I can't stress this enough. In fact, in today's day and age, I call it AI resistant. Is your job AI resistant? That's the question you have to ask yourself. And in the world of startups and small businesses, this is incredibly important and actually quite easy to do, because no matter what AI is going to do, the human factor, to be able to see things and analyze things, is always going to be there. So whether or not you're a small business that's trying to focus on the marketplace, right, and you want to get rid of activities that you don't have, pick those partners that really understand you and want to work with you, not just crunch something and pick and dump it back onto your plate, right? They want to do something qualitative to it. They want to make it better. And the same thing goes for you as a small business. What you want to do is you want to be that partner, right, to your clients. And I use the word clients, not customers, intentionally, because as you start to think about clients, it becomes a partnership, a two-way street, right? It's not transactional anymore. Right? It's not, I'm just selling one thing and then I'll see you later. And if you can start to build those kinds of relationships, these models work on both sides of the coin really well. I become effectively your shared services, your go-to for whatever it is that my small business is selling. And I have similar shared services in the back office taking care of my stuff for me. so that I can focus on the marketplace. The other thing I'd say, let me pause there. The other thing I'd say is this model of adding value, there's two sides to it. There's clearly an efficiency. It's simply cheaper. Somebody else who's got scale and can do it, they know how to do it, right? It's cheaper, it's less expensive. That's a big part of it. And it's the entry point. In other words, it's got to stand up as being less expensive than doing it yourself, always, right? And again, that's good advice for an entrepreneur. You got to be able to provide the service or the product cheaper than that customer can get it on their own. That client can do it on their own. The second is effectiveness. And effectiveness is my accountant is an expert. They know more than I do, right? They have scale, and therefore they're going to bring project experts to solve problematic problems. Somebody doesn't want to pay a bill. What is the best practice for getting that money back? How do you solve that customer dispute? And experts can be able to solve that. So it's both the efficiency, and it needs to stand on its own, but don't underestimate the effectiveness. That's where the real value is.
How do you recommend individuals pick that partner, that teammate? Is it based off of core values? Is it based off of longevity in that industry? Is it based off of personal experience, testimonials? I mean, I'm assuming it's a combination of all of them, but if you were to give advice to individuals, is it based off of trajectory? Do you see them growing with you? Do you see them serving the exact same target audience? What's your main ingredient or something recipe that you recommend?
Oh, look, the big guys are always safe, right? Somebody that's got size, scale, and time in the market is always going to be the safe bet. The problem is they're so big and large that they don't necessarily give you the attention that you need.
Right. Yep.
And being that small player in the marketplace and having that personal connection, it drives wonders. As an entrepreneur back in the day, that was key because I was a tiny little company, but I was able to land some pretty big corporations, some pretty big fish, because of my detailed expertise and the trust that those clients had in me staying with them and knowing my livelihood depended on their success. And that's more important than anything else. In fact, I'd say to you, after 40 years in the industry and working for some of the biggest companies in the world, it was the personal agenda that always closed the deal. I would get involved and say, I will be here. Doesn't matter how big my business unit is, how much revenue I was responsible for. If I went to a client and said, I will be here, here's my phone number, I will be involved in your project. It made a huge difference in the sale every time.
Wow. Yeah. So picking the big guy in the industry sounds good because it's like, oh, I'm working with that individual. But like you said, you're a small fish. They're not going to give you the attention. So it is great to have that relationship. And I believe it's the Japanese that really believe in lifelong relationships or generational relationships. So it's about building a relationship now that's going to last many, many, many years. And you get stronger as you go through the business partnership and through just the life journey. So that's crucial too, is that you have that relationship that you nurture, you feed, you serve constantly, but you're looking at the long vision, right? It's not just the next 5 years. It's probably this entire lifespan of the business. Am I right?
Absolutely correct. And not only that, that what ends up happening is that because you were the first customer, this was your first customer, that loyalty is unbelievably strong, unbelievably strong. Personal story, I have a boat. I found a guy that had 5 customers. He now has 275 customers. But when I call, he answers that phone because I believed in him 10 years ago when he had 5 customers.
Wow. Yes. That's crucial right there. It's seeing the potential in someone before anybody else does. And people will always value that. They will always thank you for that. Am I right?
Yes, that's 100% correct. And it's unbelievable how that loyalty builds. And by the way, it goes both ways, right? You're growing your business, you're expanding, you come to your most loyal client and you say, listen, I've got an idea. Can we do this together? I'm not saying it's going to run perfectly, but the quality of work that I'm going to do for you. You trust me to do it because I do it for you today and something else. Let me try it here and let's work together on it. And frequently, your clients will say, yes, I'm willing to go with you. I trust you. It's the same thought as you expand, right? As you expand.
So I would think that because of this shared services technique or strategy, it's if you're going to team up with somebody and partner with them, it's one of those things where now you have to take full accountability and responsibility to never drop the ball whenever they hand the baton off to you and constantly progress, right? If you want to hang with big dogs, you better run with the big dogs because people who do run with the big dogs notice when you start to slow down. So it is giving you this extra motivation to stay at the top of your game, to progress more, right? To refine your
100%.
systems and processes, to really put out a clear identity of who you are and how you can help. Your brand recognition has to be growing, right? So you need to be progressing on all fronts. Otherwise, you might lose out on that aspect of shared services for another person. Is that right?
Yes, your attitude has to be, I am your partner. I'm providing you a shared service, right? Whatever it is that I'm selling to you, no matter how small I am, as you grow, I got to grow with you. And I've got to stay on top of the marketplace, right? Be leading edge. The only addition that I would make to what you said is you can never drop the ball. You can never not drop the ball. It's inevitable, right?
Right.
Okay. We all have bumps in the road. The question isn't the dropping of the ball. The question is how you handle it after you've dropped it. You're all over it. You're on the phone. You're apologizing. You own it and you fix it right away, right? That's what it's all about. That's what client service is really all about, isn't it? Right? I own, it's not that there isn't going to be an issue. Hopefully, 95% of the time it's perfect, but it's never perfect, right? All the time. But when it happens, I'm all over it to make sure I get it right.
I'm looking at your book here, and we just love storytelling on this podcast, the hero's journey and fables and Rich Dad Poor Dad and how it's written. You have it looks like a couple different chapters that outline the Lucent story. Is there anything
Yeah.
you could share with us in regards to that? That just sounds interesting. I don't know what it is.
So in 1999, you probably don't know this, given when you graduated college. In 1999, the um, the telecommunications industry was exploding. AT&T was one of the largest companies in the world. Cisco Systems, these companies were enormous there. And what happened was it was a bubble because they overbuilt for telecom, you know, how much we were going to use. And it was shifting from our own phones to wireless, and nobody saw that coming. And the whole industry imploded, right? Lucent Technologies was one of those companies. They built switches for telephones, which we don't use anymore because we have cells. We have cell towers today. They built switches for telecoms. They were enormous. They were a spinoff of AT&T back in the day, and they were a day one company. And on day one, they needed to drive out costs. They needed to figure out how to manage themselves. And this was a major initiative for them to be able to stand up by themselves, right, into the marketplace. Unfortunately, because of the implosion of the industry, Lucid Technologies doesn't exist anymore. But it was, you know, a multi-billion-dollar company in the day. And we went in there and saved them hundreds of millions of dollars, literally, by creating the shared services. But more importantly, we helped them stand themselves up as an independent company because they had always been part of the AT&T behemoth. And I'm talking about not the AT&T in Texas. I'm talking about AT&T, the old-fashioned monopoly that was the long-distance company. So from 25 years ago. So that's the story with Lucid. That's the story with Lucid. But
Got it.
I got to tell you, as I've gone through my career, Lucid isn't the only company that has ceased to exist because what happens is companies realize they need to drive cost out. They come into the marketplace for shared services, right? And they either make it or they don't. And it's really interesting to see the companies that are in trouble that just want to drive the cost, right? Versus companies that truly want to partner and are there for the long haul. And those are the companies you want to partner with. Those are the companies you want to pick. So now you as a business owner need to be a little bit thoughtful about who's going to have the staying power when you pick a new client, right? Are they
Hmm.
going to be here in 10 years or 20 years, right? When it's all done. So yeah, I didn't pick right with Lucid.
Well, I do remember that bubble. Obviously, it was crazy right around the 2000s when it comes to cell phones, people picking them up. And since I've been in this book publishing business, I've interviewed many people who made their money in that space, right? It
Yeah.
was an extreme growth. 2000s, just the dot com bubble. When you're talking about telecom, Holy smokes, what a wild time. And I had no idea whenever I was in high school or in college what was going on.
But it was a wild time, right? I said, remember, I didn't say no.
So it sounds like you have a couple of core principles that you live by as an entrepreneur. And I think what you just said, when you adopt this shared services approach, you stay away from these big moves, these big maybe debt traps, right? Taking on too much debt, growing whenever the demand may fall out. So this is a very strategic approach where you could really serve a lot of people at a high level without maybe having a lot of money being out, taken out of your own bank account, put into some type of asset that may or may not be necessary within 3 to 5 years. So it sounds like you're about speed, right? You're about partnerships and relationships, but also maybe staying away from debt. Am I right about that?
100%. I can't, the client always comes first. Build a business that really adds value to that client's back office. And when you start to do that as a business owner, you all of a sudden can realize you can bootstrap this thing. You don't have to borrow a lot of money to go build your business. You can be smart about how you go do it. And be careful. And be careful of who your clients are. Make sure you don't get stuck in something, right? Be thoughtful about that a little bit, right? You don't want to be, you don't want to have a situation where you don't get paid, because that doesn't give you the cash flow you need, right? But you also don't need to borrow tons of money. Bootstrapping is a fine model. I mean, I advise a lot of startups. We call it bootstrapping,
Yeah,
instead of borrowing money.
I'm for it.
Bootstrapping
I'm
is
100% for it. Yes.
is absolutely a fine way to start, and it's all about those personal discussions, those personal relationships, right? From the clients to you and the service that you're providing. Shared services is really just it's a partner model. It says, I'm going to partner with you. I'm going to give you something of value, and we're going to do well together.
Well, when it comes to individuals who do drop the ball, and you're making me think of, I mean, I've been in this game since 2016 as with this business, but an entrepreneur since 2008. I got into real estate after reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. And since then, I've seen a lot of people go to the dark side or maybe drop out or evolve into somebody that I don't really see eye to eye with anymore. So when you look at people to partner up with and adopt this shared services technique, and you see somebody kind of go off the rails or do something that you don't agree with, or maybe there's bad energy out there surrounding them, how do you handle that? Is there any recommendation?
So I think that first of all, you need to keep to your own moral compass, right? You need to recognize that somebody's pushing you in a direction you don't want to go in, and you need to be aware of it and thoughtful about it, right? Um, Sometimes that thoughtfulness gets to, you know what, I'm going to find a new client, right? But that's an extreme reaction. But it doesn't mean. But you've got to be ready to pull that trigger, right? You can't bluff your way through it. The second, but even before that, there are also always early warning signs. You can see it from the very first meeting. You can see it in the contract negotiations as the guy decides to do business with you, right? You can feel it when you're looking them in the eye about what kind of client they're going to be. And by the way, sometimes you take those clients that become transactional, right? You provide them something, but you don't get too caught up.
Yep.
Others, they start out one way, and then you realize there's something ugly underneath it, and you've got to be thoughtful about it. You've got to see if you can't move the ball, but you can't bluff. You got to be ready to stay to your moral compass. Don't leave it, right? Keep the truth of who you are and what your business is all about and what's important. That would be my wise counsel about that.
Yeah, it's amazing how I could look back and be like, well, I overlooked some red flags because I was maybe blinded by certain things. And you usually can pick up on it. Maybe it's the gut instinct. The gut is always faster than the mind, right? There's that biological, I guess you could say, tool that's inside of you that you can sense things. And maybe it's because you could pick up on energy before something bad happens. But yeah, look for it and be aware of it and take action whenever you sense it.
So, a story, because you said you don't mind stories.
Yeah, I love stories.
I've been trying to avoid them a little bit, but story. Uh, I had a client, he was a retailer, and the CFO of the client, wanted to buy this kind of stuff. And I was like, this guy was totally transactional. What's your cost? What's your lowest price point? How are you going to do this? I met with his boss, the guy that owned the company. Totally different thing, totally different personal relationship. This guy was eager to have a partnership with us to help him grow his business, to help make him more effective, change the entire nature of the relationship. So it's not always who your client is. It may be someone else in the business that actually has that bottom line. By the way, eventually the CFO left, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah. All
because the
right. So
CEO began to see the issues with his CFO, right?
got it. So you had the right relationship. It was just the wrong person in that seat at the time. And that was it.
That was what it was. And I had a relationship with the boss, and slowly the boss saw the weaknesses of their employee and realized it was a problem there. And how many times that happens? It's all the time, right? Because it's or you close the deal with somebody and then they send you down to somebody else who could be a little bit of a jerk, right? And you need to figure out how to come back and circle back, but stay true. Don't get off your path, right? Don't get off your path. You know who you are. You know what you're good at. So that's the story there.
Within my organization, I have a phrase. I always say, think like an entrepreneur. And if you can think like an entrepreneur, you can always run towards the fires. You can really slay the dragons and be rewarded because of it, right? So, entrepreneurship is in my blood. And I think it started, once again, going back to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That's the book that really set me free. It got me into the game of real estate, which also opened up doors for the startup world. And I've realized that the more I grow as a person, the more I benefit in the business space. So I just love it because it's such an adventure. What made you fall in love with entrepreneurship, building businesses? Is there something that happened in the past as a kid from your parents? Anything that stands out, maybe a story that's very significant for you?
So I started out, my father was an entrepreneur. He had his own business, and he struggled with it, but it was his business, and he loved the fact that he could come home and have dinner with us as a family, right? I mean, he might have to go back to the office to pay the bills, right, and do all that shared service stuff, but he would make sure he was home for dinner every night, and I loved that about him. I loved it about him, and I started in corporate America, right? My first few years, I was in the corporate world, and I realized I needed to be in the front office. I was, I needed to be interacting with people. I needed to, sell and close and stand by what I sold and closed, right? I had to deliver on what I promised to deliver. And that's how I ran to the fire and started slaying dragons, right? Because I
Nice.
said, I need to be in the front office. I need to be the person who is going to be held accountable. My thumb is on that is on that contract. My thumb is that promise. And that's how I started my own business. And I started my little entrepreneurial consulting firm. And from there, it just exploded and took off. It was kind of amazing to me and quite enjoyable, I'll have to say.
Man,
Um,
you speak like me. Were you born in August? I'm an August 10th birthday. Are
no,
you?
no, no, I'm a March. I'm an Aries, March 20th.
Oh, okay, good deal. Because most entrepreneurs I've noticed are in that Leo space. So I was just
Yes,
wondering. Okay.
yes, yes. And I'll tell you, at the end of my career, I came back to working with startups because I had the opportunity in my career to behave like a startup person. My shared services business was an example of that. It was for a big corporation, but I was doing a startup business. So I had an opportunity to always be startup, and I tended to go to the new spaces, right? We talked about how technology created this business, right? There, the world is constantly changing, and there's always a need for something new. So it was always attracting me what's new out there, what's changing the world that I can start to create a business around. And some of those businesses got pretty big. I was lucky, but that's what I always look for. And as I slowed down my career, that is exactly what I'm looking for in the small businesses that I help start up, right? That is on the boards that I sit on. I'm looking for those kind of companies that are looking for the next thing, right? Something that the world is changing, then my offering, my product will actually fill a void. And that's what I call it, filling the void, right? How good are you at filling the void? And I was
Yeah.
always void filling.
I could
So
tell, man, even after, you've been in this game a long time, the enthusiasm, the energy is still there. It's
I love
because you do really affect change, but also I'm assuming because you're around badass people who are trying to build those dreams, right? There's some vision that they have, and you're helping them facilitate that, which, I mean, that to me, that's why I love this. It completes the hero's journey, right? The more
100.
you learn, the more you earn. Basically, you can lean back and help those who are a little bit behind you in their own journey. That's it.
That's it. That's it. That's all it is. And I'll tell you, it works so well. I mean, even at the university level, sometimes I do this. I'll pick up MBAs or university students who are in the business marketplace and want to go do this for some of the schools I work with. So it even gets down to that level, not just, but it's most exciting when you have a professional, someone who's, got a business, they're off and running, they need help, they need some guidance. And I say, follow your passion and be true to yourself. You do those two things, everything else will work right as long as you have the discipline to do it.
100%. Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people that I know who are extremely successful and they're always saying passion is not a part of it. I can't imagine building a business, putting your life on the line for something you don't love. And then I can't imagine obtaining wealth by losing yourself in the process. To
Right,
me, that is what leads to hell, right? And
right.
so if you hate what you're doing and you become someone you don't recognize, pure hell. You might have the cars and the houses and the money in the bank, but if you lose yourself in the process, it's not worth it. So,
I
um,
agree.
so I'm with you on that. Outside of your book, is there one that you recommend to our audience? We always like to hear what entrepreneurs out there are reading, if there's a book that really changed their pathways and made them a different version. So, anything that stands out in your life.
Yes, it's a very old book. Okay, I'm getting a copy. It's by a guy named Jeffrey Moore, and it's called Living on the Fall. Uh,
Wow, I do not know this. So I have a list of everybody, and I always write down new books that I have never heard of. What is it called?
it's a 25-year-old book. It's by a guy named Jeffrey Moore, and he wrote two books. His most famous book is actually Crossing the Chasm, which is what we've been talking about today. And actually, I'd probably recommend that one first because it was so good. Jeffrey A. Moore, Crossing the Chasm, and it's a book about how do you start up leveraging technology, not necessarily be a technology company, but leveraging the marketplace of technology, and how does that business work? And the whole story is you get into the startup mode and then you hit a wall, right? Because the big guys get in it, something gets in the way, and how you can cross that chasm and be successful. And that's what the book is about. It was a terrific book. I
Got it.
recommend it.
Jeffrey Moore, is that what you said?
Jeffrey Moore, yeah, A. Moore, Jeffrey A. Moore, Moore.
Got it.
Jeffrey Moore.
I gotta look
Crossing
that up.
that.
Crossing the Chasm. Okay, I'm writing a book, called Escape the Cave. And so when you said that, I'm like, ooh, it sounds similar to my book. What's
Similar,
that
right?
about? So,
That's right. That's right. Yes. Yeah.
anyways, that's beautiful. Is there a website that you recommend people check out? I know you're on LinkedIn. I believe that's how we found you. So, the book is called Shared Services, Adding Value to the Business Units. Is there a website or social media channel that you are quite active on?
No, just on LinkedIn is where way to get me. Is the best way to get me.
Got it.
So
Got it. Now, do you still do consultations with people, or is that, case
all
by
day,
case situation?
all day long. It's now 12 o'clock. We're coming on 12. I haven't gotten out of this chair since 8 o'clock this morning.
No days off. That's an entrepreneur's life right there.
Well, I gotta say, this is my last call of the day.
Oh, okay. Good deal.
I'm gonna go exercise and enjoy this gorgeous weather in New York City. So.
Got it, man. Beautiful. Get outside. I really appreciate you taking the time, sharing your wisdom with us. Guys, pick up his book. Obviously, a man who loves what he does and he hasn't lost his way. Shared Services, adding value to the business units. And you can look him up on Amazon. It goes under Danielle, and that's S. Schulman. That's Schulman. But he goes by Don. So, Don, thank you so much for being here, man.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to chat. Have a great day.
Remember, guys, $1 million book will lead to $1 million life.